Welcome to Stemiverse podcast episode 50. In this episode, Peter and Marcus talk with Nurit Bar-Shai. Nurit is an interdisciplinary artist who works at the intersection of art, science and technology. She's a co-founder of Genspace NYC, a community biotech lab in Brooklyn, New York, ranked by Fast Company among the top 10 most innovative education companies. As an activist and educator working with biological systems, she conducts experiments through creative collaborative inquiries and addresses the ethics and the emerging practices of do-it-yourself biology and citizen science. As the Arts and Culture Program Director at Genspace, she developed content for educational, cultural and outreach programs, creating solutions to bridge the arts and biological science. Her research and artistic practice looks into microbial social networks and communication systems, collective collaboration, emergence, soft genetic modification, and biomaterial fabrications. Nurit developed collaborative STEAM projects including the NYC Biome Map. She's a co-curator of the BioArt exhibition Cut, Paste, Grow, curator of the Genspace Pop-up Lab at Biofabricate, has partnered with the American Society for Microbiology for their Agar Art competition and the co-organizer of Nodes Networks NYC. Nurit is a contributor to the Leonardo ebook Meta-Life, Biotechnologies, Synthetic Biology, A-Life, the Arts. Her work is featured in the book Biodesign, Nature, Science, Creativity, published by the Museum of Modern Art. Her artwork was commissioned by Turbulence.org, won a Prix Ars Electronica, and included in the collection of the Rose Goldson Archive of New Media Art at Cornell University. Nurit held residencies at Tel Aviv University Microbiology Lab of Professor Esho Ben-Jacob, who studied the social life of bacteria, and the Epibone, a bioengineering New York City startup that grows bone tissue for skeletal reconstruction. This is Stemiverse podcast episode 50. Stemiverse is a podcast produced by Tech Explorations. Our mission is to help educators become awesome at teaching STEM, be it at home or in the classroom. Whether you are a professional or casual teacher teaching in a classroom, or a parent or caretaker teaching at home, this podcast brings you the knowledge and experiences of practitioners, academics, entrepreneurs, and lifelong learners who are passionate about education and strive every day to help our children prepare for life in a world of radical change, and why not, abundance. Marcus, it's been a while.
It has, Peter. How are you?
I had a little holiday last week. I feel much better.
That's nice. How did that feel?
Went down to Wollongong. It was the annual Wollongong Air Show. There's like a small airport down there, and every year they bring aircraft, new and old, from all around the world. Second World War fighters, transport planes, acrobatic planes, helicopters, a lot of helicopters, and it's just like a 2-day show. I managed to stay for half a day because the kids got bored.
Great. Okay.
But it was awesome, so I enjoyed that.
Cool. Did you get to go inside any planes?
I did. I did go inside a DC-7 from the 60s. There's basically nothing in it left. It's just everything was exposed. Must have been really hard flying and definitely not pressurized cabin. And then I also got into a Qantas 747-400.
All right. So they brought a plane.
Or Qantas donated the plane to the airport there. So you can actually go at any time and have a tour. Or you can actually go and sit in the cockpit and have a real pilot to explain what all the bells and whistles in the cockpit are.
Okay, I was thinking, tour of a 747. Okay.
Definitely enjoy that.
Okay, awesome.
So who are we talking to today?
We're talking to Nurit.
Nurit Bar-Shai. Hey, hi, Nurit.
Hi. Hi, Peter.
It's great to have you with us. Where are you at the moment?
I am currently in Israel.
Yep.
And I've been traveling a lot, and it's kind of a closing cycle for me because that's where I was born.
So what brings you to Israel, or maybe I should say back to Israel, Nurit?
I'm here both on a very interesting research opportunity at the Tel Aviv University, which I'm taking place right now, and I started this year, as well as some teaching opportunities that I couldn't resist. I love teaching. I love sharing multidisciplinary knowledge with students and being able to create access to maybe subjects or disciplines that they didn't think that they would have before, such as teaching biology to art students and design students.
That's an interesting cross.
So what is it that you do?
Yeah, take us back. Tell us about yourself.
Who are you?
Wow. I was born in Israel, and I guess I had a very ordinary childhood, nowhere to the craziness the world around me today. And as a child, my family traveled a lot too. We've lived in the Philippines for a few years. And I have also a lot of family all over the world. I guess it's part of being Jewish these days. Just have a lot of family, mostly in Europe, in the US. So I think it resonated with me everywhere I went or visited. I always felt that I could stay or I could live. Any city I came to, I thought I could stay here or imagine how I would live in this place. So this is something that I always felt comfortable with, new places. And I think it's something that I took with me in my work whenever I encounter a new subject or a new discipline. I never felt fear, but mostly curiosity. So this is something that was really important for me in my life, I guess, just this exploration or taking journeys in places that you don't know. I guess if I think of my childhood, something that you've asked me earlier, what I would tell or think to my 12-year-old of me. Yeah. And I was trying to think about that because that's a very difficult question. So one of my very early childhood memories, I guess, was as a kid, we used to go with my dad to forests near our house. And I remember how he would turn stones and show us all the creatures that lived or hiding under these stones, like worms and ants and insects. And I remember very strongly these experiences and how exciting and surprising it was to find all these new things that at first glance you won't see, all these invisible worlds hidden from us. And I guess both these experiences of discovering and explorations, I guess, really affected the way I work or using art as a medium or using other mediums in integrating it into my art.
So you were fascinated by the very small, right? And not just very small, but also very small and alive at the same time?
Well, I don't think that's something that I was aware of at that time. And I don't think that I could link it directly to what I'm doing now, but mostly about, I guess it's mostly about trying to understand or trying to uncover the things that are not obvious to you at first glance. And that there's more to what the eye can see in terms of experimentation, in terms of process, in terms of creativity, rather than the medium itself. So the fact that I am working with biological systems today might actually come from other places rather than these directly insects that I saw back then.
So tell us about your art, because it's quite unique what others are doing.
So my journey with art has started really very commonly. For my undergrad, I studied at Bezalel Art School in Israel, which is in the art department. And later I continued in my master's to NYU at ITP, Interactive Telecommunications Program, where technology was my major focus in my work, integrating physical computing and computational.
Well, did you work with Tom Ego?
Exactly. He's one of my heroes. Tom Igo. Yeah, definitely one of the reasons I went to ITP, Tom. And when I graduated, I had the opportunity to collaborate with really wonderful, fascinating people, mostly in biology world, and had the opportunity to meet Oren Katzenionat-Sur at the time, who founded Symbiotica in Australia. And at MIT, Natalie Kildell from the bioengineering department, and I was working with my fascinating group, the Grafting Parlor. And through these experiences, I was exposed to this other world that I was not aware of before, and thinking about this collaborations. I had the opportunity to meet at the time Professor Eshel Ben Yaakov from the Tel Aviv University, who worked with bacteria among his other labs of neuroscience and computational physics, and meeting other really fascinating people that founded the DIY Bio in Boston, and coming back to New York, met like-minded people that we all wanted to build a lab from different reasons. I really wanted to have my own space where I could conduct experiments rather than going to other people's lab. And other people in Genspace were too fascinated by the idea of building their own lab. And it took us a year. We had a lot of equipment, but it was really hard to find a place when we came with the idea that we want to build a biology lab. It sounds really crazy to most people until we found this wonderful space.
So what?
Yeah.
What time frame? Like what year is this?
Oh, so I met Professor Eshel Ben Yaakov at 2009, and that's the same year that we founded Genspace. And indeed, it took us a whole year until we were able to open it to the public in 2010.
So Genspace was initially a private lab. Is that how it started? Or was it open to the public from the very beginning?
So from the very beginning, we opened it to the public. It's just that while we were studying, it was impossible for us to, while we built it and created the space itself, we were meeting at the beginning in other places like the New York City Resistor, who kindly gave us a space for a day a week where we started calling people to meet with us, to talk about ideas, to start conducting experiments. Or we met at Dan Grushkin, one of the founders, in his house and invited people there and conducted experiments in his kitchen. So it was very hands-on DIY.
Could you describe those experiments? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, is it bacteria or chemistry or biology?
And how did you not get raided by the FBI? This has happened.
What schools can do it?
No. Like this literally has happened to bio hackerspaces in the US.
Oh, I see. Yeah, the times, I suppose.
So indeed, one of the fears was safety, which was from the beginning an issue that we took very seriously. And obviously our first experiments were, I would say, very mature. We didn't conduct things that we would think that would have a safety issues for the people around us or to ourselves. When we did open Genspace, we had the opportunity to invite people to train us, and kindly the MIT safety officer volunteered to come all the way to New York to give us a whole workshop about safety issues. In our opening, we even invited the FBI from the beginning. We were in very close relationships with them.
Proactive.
It happens.
Yes. We were very aware of all the concerns and all the risks, and we didn't want to risk anyone in our community. This is something that we are giving much concern to, both to the projects that members in the community are doing and obviously safety of the people. Genspace is a BSL 1 biosafety level 1 lab.
Yeah, we're looking at a picture on the genspace.org website /mission, where there's an article about the Genspace story. There's a photograph there about a group of 4 people doing experiments. I believe that one of those is you, Nurit, in 2009, right?
Oh, that's a very early picture.
Most of us are familiar with the traditional type of makerspace, the kind of space where people can get access to things such as 3D printers, laser cutters, CNC machines, and can work with electronics and robots and as such in a communal environment. The kind of space that Genspace is a bit like that, except that the projects that people pursue there are in chemistry and biology. I wanted to ask, back in 2009, did you see a need in the community for such a makerspace, or did you perhaps anticipate it, or were you really scratching your own itch?
So it's interesting to think about when a lot of the maker spaces in New York, especially in Brooklyn, where Genspace is located, has raised after the 2008 recession. There was a big movement back then where people were trying to make their own communities, build their own communities, and create their own resources, especially based on what was happening back then in terms of culture and society. And the New York City Resistor, which many of my friends were part of, really affected especially me. But other spaces like the DAMP community, where Genspace initially was located, was also a very unique space where a lot of really unique people from all walks of life, coming from the MIT Media Lab or from Parsons, from ITP, came along. Architects, we had a cupcake factory, we had chickens on the roof. So a very, very unique place where it was an old building in Brooklyn that was accumulated by really creative people. And when my friends heard that we were looking for a space for Genspace, they offered us to come and check it out. And so it was really, really affected, or I would say inspired by the maker movement. And I wouldn't see it separated, especially in what was happening back then in Brooklyn and the inspiration of Brooklyn back then.
So why did you feel the need to create a new type of makerspace? What type of equipment was missing from, say, a makerspace like New York Resistor? And what sort of equipment did you start with and eventually acquired?
Right. So I think the thought was, when we started Genspace, was not to imitate any other spaces, but rather to, because we had nothing previously that we could take from. So we really had to come up with something new based on the motivations that each one of us came from. So it was nothing with a written manual or protocol that we thought, okay, let's build a space. But everyone knew that, all of the founders, we really knew that we wanted to create a lab. So this was the major motivation of creating such a space. It's true that today you could see that so Genspace was the first lab that was open to the public, but today there's about 125 groups. Some of them are labs, some of them are meeting programs, and you could see all the list on the DIYbio.org website. And a lot of them are coming from makerspaces. Genspace initially was created as a platform where you could have the equipment of a BSL-1 lab, but also the idea was to create a community that would come and meet and talk and take part of experimentation or research, but also a place where we could invite the people for more cultural programs like talks and workshops, education, to share ideas hands-on. So that was something that was really important to have tangible, because even back then, and of course today, you could take classes through internet. So you could take a class at Stanford and at MIT and Harvard. But it's really important for us to give the opportunity to actually experience with wet lab work, rather than just learn or observe it or hear about it.
Do you know the maker/hackerspace BioCurious.
Of course, yes.
How do you guys differ from what they are doing, or are you doing pretty much the same thing but just on the other side of the coast, or other coast rather?
So I think the unique thing about every lab space is its community and the people that build it. So obviously New York and the community in New York is very different from the community in San Francisco or in Baltimore or in Singapore or in Paris. And I think, I wouldn't want to compare it. I think this is the strength of having such a variety of biolab. And the citizens, since we're talking about citizen science, the citizens are making the community. So there's a lot of parallels between BioCurious and Genspace, but there's also the unique things that BioCurious is giving their community and Genspace is giving their community. I can talk about Genspace that, especially my background as an artist, I was really trying to bring more of that into the space. And I'm really happy to see how in the last few years the art and design aspect is, or the discipline of art and design is more and more integrated, and the importance of it with biology is being accepted as a discipline or being acknowledged. So this is something that I'm really excited to see. And I'm also excited to see how programs that we're trying to integrate that combine art, design, and biology is being explored in other citizen science communities as well.
And what have been some of your favorite projects to come out of these spaces?
So in terms of tools, we are very, very proud of the Opentrons.
Oh, what is that?
Opentron?
So the Opentron, what is a project that you could say now it's a startup with one of our members. It's an automatic robotic arm that automate protocols, and it's open, and you can get it starting for $4,000. So it really created a market for those who couldn't afford these machines that cost thousands of dollars. So this is something very unique. On the other hand, we can see projects like Heather Dewey Hackberg, who's an artist, and her work, Stranger Vision, started at Genspace. And I really encourage everyone to look at her work. She's just a fascinating artist, really great at what she's doing. She would take samples from bubble gums and hair that she would find in the street. And then she would come back to the lab and would hack these objects to find their genetic information and compare it to some police profiling. And eventually she would create these sculptures of faces based on this information and talk about the DNA that we leave behind and how DNA profiling is subjected to sometimes cultural and social perceptions. So it's really, really interesting the way she's working.
It's amazing, Again, for our listeners, there's information about both of the two items that you mentioned, Nurit, on the genspace.org website under featured projects. The Opetron, I was just looking at the picture, to me looks like a 3D printer, right?
Yeah.
But it contains a robotic arm or apparatus that it looks like it's got a syringe component that is able to inject liquids into vials.
Test tubes, yeah.
Test tubes. That's awesome. And then there's information about the Heather's work as well. Nurit, I wanted to ask you about art, just to move a little bit away from the technical, since you are an artist and we don't get many of you on the podcast.
No, they do cloning now at the hackerspace.
We can clone you. So what I wanted to ask is, looking what Heather does, it's totally out there kind of thinking. I would definitely never have thought of picking up a chewing gum and analyzing it, for example. Is this one of the lessons that we, in general, can learn from art? I'm thinking of how would this kind of thinking help me both as an educator, as an engineer. And one thing that comes to mind when we discuss a topic like this one is Einstein and his quote that the world's greatest scientists are also artists. There seems to be an important crossover between science and art. What do you make of that? What can we learn from that?
So first, I really think we have to add another A, capital A, to STEM education for arts. And as an activist, I would also say we could add an extra A for activism, because you could also learn from that a lot.
Absolutely.
I guess any discipline, any cross-disciplinary processes could lead to any new innovation. And I think this is also how nature works, either by accident or by combining two things that you didn't imagine before to become this something new. This is how children are born, right? From two different, very, very different other people, adult people. So why not integrate it into practices? And unfortunately, we still learn today in silos. Education is still unperceptive to these new notions. So I hear a lot of people liking to talk about this, but it's really hard to put it in practice. But for example, Genspace is a space that we do want to allow this cross-disciplinary, that once you have a platform that anyone could come to such a space, if it's an architect or an engineer or a dancer or a fashion designer. And we can all ask questions about this biotechnology that is integrated into every aspect of our everyday lives, right? Because we see it in the food that we eat, and we see it in the materials around us. Even our soaps and detergents are probably engineered. And we hear a lot about the fact that we have biological treatments instead of chemical treatment to things around us. We have tissue culture engineering that has enabled us to start thinking about how we can grow our organs in the lab. We think about biological systems as a replacement for computational systems. So we start thinking about how biotech is really becoming this new living blocks of our lives. We can create new materials today with living systems. So the question would be, who can do all these really amazing things? Yeah. Is it only biologists, or can anyone be part of this wonderful new world around us?
Yeah. So my next question is this. My artistic skill in any kind of art is practically non-existent. While I understand science, I find it hard to apply art in my teaching and work in general. I believe that this is true for many other teachers in STEM. What advice do you have for people like me? How can art-challenged people like me start to integrate art into our regular STEM curriculum?
Right. So first, I would like to separate between art as a language and creativity in general. And it's true that you could say that you could learn through art, but I wouldn't say that this is a motivation when one creates art. It is part of a learning experience, but I don't think that when one makes art, this is the goal. And I also, sometimes I have difficult that people will, especially in the sciences, would think about using art to promote the science. And for me, integrating art and the sciences are a process of collaboration. And the idea that you could use sciences to create as an artistic act and vice versa. So for those who are interested to use creativity rather than art, I would say, in their process is something else, because I think the greatest architects are artists, and the greatest surgeons are artists as well. And you could say it in any profession, right? You could say the best, the greatest chefs are artists, and so on. But creativity in the classroom, or creativity, is something that could be beyond a specific language or a specific motivation. And that could be integrated in classroom in any means that one teacher can come up with. And I'm sure that in any scale, from the students to the teachers to schools in general, you could integrate creativity.
The main objective here, what I called a challenge earlier, is really creativity. You don't pursue art itself directly, right? At least in a makerspace as opposed to an atelier.
Right. And creativity for me is a lot about problem solving. And this is also something that I could see within bacteria, even how they conduct problem solving. But they do problem solving as a collective, which is even more fascinating because we can learn a lot from them, from bacteria itself.
So me and Marcus are worried that as we add more letters into STEM, such as A to get STEAM, then we can also get STREAM, which adds an R for reading, or even I heard lately of eStream, which adds another E for entrepreneurship. That will end up with an educational paradigm that can be practically impossible to develop into a curriculum that a teacher can deliver to a class. It's just too many letters in this acronym description of what the curriculum or the educational paradigm is. I'd like to ask you what you think about all this.
So I see a lot of, if this is the fear of the new, because it's not integrated yet, only by maybe people do it individually in their classrooms already, rather than the system encouraging it. But I wonder if this is a regular practice that when the new comes, we tend as humans to fear the new and not know at first how to integrate it or think that this might harm us. And we see it a lot in technology when the camera was introduced. So we were afraid of that. And then when television was introduced, we were afraid of that. And we blamed education. And then when computer games came, and we blame them for corrupting us. So I don't know if it's we can compare all these things, but I don't think that the new is, or new ideas should compromise the past, but rather add to them or enable us new platforms to innovate upon them. And this is something that individual teachers could take, each one as they feel comfortable, rather than we can see how the system and the broad could encourage teachers to use these creative tools rather than put strict rules about what they can or can't do.
Yeah, really the STEM, it's not even an acronym the way that I understand it, right? It's a philosophy of education. Now, what exactly you put in and what you combine in order to help students understand perhaps a concept that develops skills, like as you mentioned earlier, creativity, that is really up to the teacher, isn't it?
Exactly. But the system, in my view, can enable it or can create a platform that is open enough for introducing new tools, or what can we add? What kind of tools we can add to our toolbox in the future, just like 3D printers are becoming an educational tool that enables creativity. I just met this week someone who's teaching English through 3D printers, through animation, and animation through 3D printers. So I think this is fantastic. I mean, who would thought that you could teach English through animation? But this is something he's doing in his classroom. I don't know exactly about his program because I just briefly met. But I just thought that it was fantastic that he found his own tools to teach something and enable the students to ask questions about something that is so obvious.
Yeah, like learning a language the traditional way involves, the traditional tools and many, many years of hard work. So I suppose that never goes away, but he found a different way to achieve that result.
Right. Or engaging the students and reaching the same goal. But I think the process could be individually created. And this is also something that today technology is encouraging, not only in education, but we could see it also in economics. We could see it in the industry, this is something that, for example, 3D printers brought to the way we can perceive life, that we could create mass production, but it's all, I would call it unique copies, because each copy could be completely unique from the other, yet it is mass produced. And this is something that happens in nature naturally, these concepts of unique copies. So why not integrate it into education as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got one more Genspace related question, and then we can move into rapid fire questions. I find it very interesting because in rapid fire questions, we'd like to get a lot of actionable materials from you. More of that in a minute. So I'm looking at Genspace, and I know that you also have programs and classes for educators as part perhaps of their professional development, but also classes for students. Could you tell us a little bit about them, and what are your objectives as an organization in relation to those opportunities?
Right. So when we started Genspace, one of the very first things we did was develop our education program, which was very important for us, and it has been part of our major programs in Genspace. So the opportunities to bring not only adult education, but also being able to support schools, especially around our community, was very important for us to involve our community. So I would say a lot of the school are under-resourced in New York City and around the country. And we really wanted to support students around the city, especially in our community, and give some opportunities to these students coming to Genspace to conduct experiments and to learn. But also a recent project is to enable them a residency, which they can come and develop their own projects. We also support training, part of the DNA barcode project with the DNA Learning Center.
DNA barcode.
Yes.
Fluorescence.
It's a great project that's started by the DNA Learning Center called Spring Harbor. And the idea is to enable students, high school students, to learn more about synthetic biology, bioengineering, and analyze genetic information about the things around them. And if you know the Sushi Gate, which was a huge thing a few years ago, started by two high school students who found that the fish in the sushi was not the fish that the restaurant declared, or the cheese in the supermarket was from cow rather than from and so this inspired other schools to start investigating about the things around them. And some of the students would find out about organic food versus non-organic food. Other students would be interested to find which food around them was genetically modified, or just about the origins of organisms around them, and so on. So it's very diverse, and each year they have a competition, and they come up with all these really amazing projects. Other programs that we are involved with is the BioRocket, which is storytelling, that we invite students, and then they can come, they can work during the spring, and then they can stay over the summer to conduct their own experiments and to come up with a research experience with mentors at Genspace. So this is part of the educational programs for students rather than for adults. We have a lot of other adult education programs at Genspace.
I'm looking at your classes on the Genspace website, and it's really amazing. If I was in New York, I'd attend them all.
Yeah, I want to take them all, and I don't have the time or the opportunity. So yeah, it's just growing, and we're very proud of our education and cultural programs.
So my last question in this segment is whether we can replicate Genspace in other parts of the world. And in your case, what was the biggest obstacle that you had to overcome?
I could say that on any, it might be a good advice for any startup or any organization. I think it's the human capital, because even if you do have resources and space, which is the practical part of starting a new lab. It's the human capital. It's who you're doing it with, and eventually it's all about relationships, right? And what people bring along with them and what stays. So that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest obstacle as well.
With the right people, anything is possible. We can go to Mars if we want, and we can definitely build a Genspace in Sydney. Marcus, rapid fire time. You want to take number one?
Yeah, absolutely. So, who has been the most influential in shaping the way you teach?
Wow, I wouldn't know about a specific person, but I think it's accumulation of so many experiences and something you bring and develop yourself throughout the years. But the one thing that I could really say is that you just have to try, and if something works, then you can try again and again. One thing that was really important for me all through my teaching is bring both the philosophical or the historical background of things, but also the hands-on experience. This is something that was always so bring history together with tangible experience. And I always believe that students learn from a variety of experience. Some are better listeners, and some need visuals, and some need the actual touch to things. And using all your senses is so important in teaching to adults and to kids as well. And trying to combine these different experiences in the class is part of my personal teaching experience. And because I'm coming from art, I think you have more possibilities and more resilient towards it. So nobody would tell you that you're doing something wrong because it's always under the umbrella of art. So there's less right and wrong, but mostly what you could achieve from these experiences and the freedom, and that gives you a lot of freedom. I don't know if other disciplines would be able to adopt these practices because they have more set of rules. But part of being an artist is being a hacker, being a maker, being able to take all these measurable settings and rules and try to create some, I'd say, chaos, or try to create opportunities that you wouldn't have thought otherwise. And from these small opportunities, you would be able to discover new things, or you would be able to let those who are more silent or shy to bright and shine out. And this is, I think, the unique thing about using art practices in my classrooms. But I wouldn't know otherwise because that's where I come from. So I don't know anything else but doing this and using these tools in my own work as well as in my teaching.
So there's many roads lead to learning, just one size.
Yeah.
All these different types of learning, and that every individual student is. So that's a good advice for any teacher out there. Try different things, accommodate different needs. Got one more. Now this is... Normally, Marcus asks, what's your favorite programming language? But especially for you, Nurit, I would like to ask you, what's your favorite bacteria?
That's an easy one. Or actually not when I'm thinking about it. So I have a favorite, I wouldn't say one bacteria, but more a species, which is the Bacillus. These are ground bacteria, so they live very close to roots of plants and vegetables. Maybe something to tell us about roots. And they're very intelligent bacteria. I'm working with 3 of these species, the Bacillus vortex and the Bacillus CNT. And I have to say that in different periods in my work, I loved one more than the other, but I do love all 3 of them in different ways. But they're very unique in terms of they're considered to be smart bacteria, so to say, and they were found about 20 years ago by Professor Eshel Ben-Yaakov, who I've been working with, and it's really unique because bacteria, when you think about it, these are single cells, but they work together as a multi-cell organism, and
they're everywhere.
And this is something fascinating to see how a colony, a collective of parts, can work together, make decisions together.
Dominate the world.
So that was unique. And dominate the world and us as well.
Absolutely.
Our body, our environment. Yeah.
Okay, one more. We always like to complete our bookcase with interesting books, and we'd like to ask you for one or two book recommendations so that we can explore more of the things that we've been discussing.
I think on growth and form would be something that I would recommend.
Sorry, growth?
On growth and form. Something else that I would recommend is The Chemical Basis of Morphogenesis by Turing, Alan Turing. So a lot of people don't know, but Alan Turing was very much interested in biology as well as in computation. And he's one of the first who actually studied the morphology and the environment and the impact of environment on morphology, which is so fascinating.
So, wow, Alan Turing, the computer scientist that contributed in the Second World War's ending. He was also was he a professional biologist, or would you call him a...
I think he was just interested in patterns in nature and the mathematics behind it. And as everything else in his life, he was just a brilliant person in that realm as well.
Any parting thoughts for our listeners? Any do's, don'ts, or lookouts?
I would say listen more to your bacteria. They are all in your guts. So I love the term guts feeling. Some people say that it's our second brain. And I like to think about it as opposed to our fixed brain in the top of our head. This one is more elusive. We exchange it with other people, with plants, with animals, and it comes and goes through our body, within our body. It depends on the things that we eat, on how much sun we're exposed to. So there's something about the bacteria that resides in us that because eventually we know today more and more about, and we understand that it sends a lot of messages to our brain, and we act upon all these messages. We still don't know much about it, but we're starting to understand how our brain works, both from rational, but also probably from messages that we get from within these gut bacteria. So maybe there is something about our guts feeling. We should listen more to it.
Absolutely. Can our listeners contact you? And if so, what is the best way to do so?
Through my email would be good, either through my Genspace email, nurit@genspace.org, or through my personal email. It's n@nuritbarshai.com. So everyone who's interested, I'll be happy to.
Brilliant. We'll add it.
Right.
We'll add it to the show notes.
I also got to ask, when are you doing an exhibition here in Australia?
I'd love to come to Australia. I've never been.
Absolutely. That would be so amazing. Yeah. Right now, I'm looking at your website. My
website is so up to date. So I would not encourage your listeners to go there. This is part of being an active artist is I'm always engaged with the work rather than documenting it. So I'm not as good as documenting it as actually making. But currently a work is being installed, and there's a new Natural History Museum is being
Where is that?
Opened in Israel. It's in Tel Aviv. Yeah. On one hand, it's really sad that there was no Natural History Museum in Israel until now. I'm really excited that there is now. And they have a new exhibition there, apart from their permanent exhibition, and 2 of my works are going to be there.
That's great.
Show.
I'm going to look for an opportunity to have a look at your work up close, and there's quite a bit that I can look at, photographs, etc., on the web. So I'm going to try and make a good collection of them for the show notes of this episode.
I can also send you information.
Please.
Obviously.
It'd be great to have it in one place. So Nurit, thank you very much for your time. It was
thank you.
Excellent, experience talking to you. It was definitely something different for me. What about you, Marcus?
Completely different.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Nurit. That's all for this episode. The notes for this episode that include links to many of the resources mentioned and information on how to get in touch with Nurit are available on our website, texplore.com/pay/Stemiverse. Each episode comes with its own page on the Tech Explorations website and a goldmine of information in the notes. This Stemiverse podcast episode was produced by Tech Explorations. Do you have any questions or suggestions? Would you like to nominate a friend or colleague to be our guest? Please email us at pa@texplore.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes by searching for the name of our podcast, Stemiverse. That's Stemiverse. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next time.